Well, the real thing is a little bit less idyllic than that. This is a little stream that empties down into the Katse Reservoir. The Katse Dam is now the tallest dam in Africa. This is a village next to the reservoir. You can see it gets very cold there, and men wrap themselves in blankets as they walk around.
Because the country is rather mountainous.
Yeah.
And has the height.
And this is another smaller dam called Muela. It actually has had a fairly gentle impact on its surroundings. All of this water that's stored gets piped to South Africa, which has paid for the construction of these dams.
And of course, some of the international money that's come in, we've seen a little corruption.
That's right. This has been a celebrated case because 10 or 12 multinationals have been accused of offering bribes to Lesotho officials. 3 have actually been convicted so far. More convictions are expected. And it's shown that multinationals, not just these developing countries that are assumed to be corrupt, but it's the multinationals who offer vast sums of money. This is an operations building for this Muela Dam complex, and you can see it just towers over the village and changes the scale of everything. It's a disturbing, ominous building, I find.
Doesn't really fit there.
No. And this is the Katse Dam, a rather elegant dam, but quite huge. And it has had an enormous impact. The rivers have been severely affected. This is another view of that dam. The seismic problems often result from dams. As the reservoir filled, there were earthquakes, and the land sort of split, and it went all the way up the side of a mountain, about 1,000 feet. It terrified the people, it was so wide that you can look down into it, as I did there.
They're not always taking into consideration all the geology and other factors that have to be dealt with.
That's right. Now we move to the nation of Botswana in the Okavango Delta, where Ted Scudder, the man I wrote about, actually prevented or helped to prevent a dam from being built, which would have destroyed one of the most extraordinary repositories of wildlife in the world, the Okavango Delta. So we went and visited the delta. There it is, and we'll just have a number of shots of it. And here are a couple of storks, which were rather extraordinary at the top of that tree.
This is a very, very famous delta that was used to the natural flooding.
There has been no dam, fortunately, so it still gets its thin layer of water through the year that's called a flood, but it's like a flood in slow motion. But it provides a watering hole for hundreds of thousands of animals, including these elephants.
It's important to maintain that natural floodplain.
That's right. And this is a view of the delta from an airplane, and another view from an airplane.
And it's really a wild, remote area. It's not easy to get to.
It's not easy to get to. It goes through a dry season, and here during the wet season, just thousands of little islands, each sustaining life. And this is Victoria Falls, one of the biggest waterfalls in the world, and it's really at the end of the reservoir formed by the Kariba Dam, the dam that displaced the Tonga people.
The beautiful falls.
It is, and this is the Kariba Reservoir, which at one point got quite low, and when it got low, many people decided to build luxury homes there, people from Lusaka, the capital, only to find that the reservoir filled up again, and so they found that their homes were partially immersed as a result. This is the kind of
bad planning,
short-term thinking. And this is Kariba Dam. It's I called it a kind of Stalin-esque dam.
Massive amount of concrete.
That's right. And this was my interpreter when I went to visit the Tonga in their resettlement village. A fellow named Imi, a baobab tree overlooking our campsite. These are extraordinary trees that hold a huge amount of water.
They were designed for the natural flow, and of course the people meeting in the village.
Right.
Showing their concern.
That's right.
This tree is very interesting because it's listed where the floods are.
Now we move to Australia. We're in the Murray Basin. Now this is a tree that shows the dates of the various floods over the last 3/4 of a century and the heights that they reached. This is the devastation that's been caused by the dams at the top of the system and the many water diversions, where these trees are dying. And a riverbed that's just dried up.
Obviously dams cause that problem.
And Hume Dam, one of the dams that's done this. And Dartmouth Dam, the other major dam. And this is one of the locks on the river where, despite the extreme aridity, they grow lawns.
Not exactly the best use of the water.
No. And this is the lock itself. And this is called the Barma Choke, a kind of a natural place for lots of wildlife that looks unnaturally green because the water is pumped through there so it gets to the farmers. And this is a farmer.
Very concerned about how much water is available. Beautiful coastline.
Right. This is an old sheep shearing place, now abandoned. And this is a farmer's reservoir, and you can see what the drought has done. It's just about empty. And this is a watering hole along one of the rivers in the system, and another one of the locks on the Murray. And this is a salt depository where very salty water is pumped, and the land is kind of sacrificed so that the salt gets away from other places. And you can see here the land is just turned white from salt. This is at the bottom of the system where there's this extraordinary lagoon. This is next to the Coorong Lagoon, and over that is the Southern Ocean. And this is an Aboriginal fish trap, now abandoned, but it used to be that the tide would rise over this trap, the fish would come over, then as the tide dropped, the fish would be trapped inside there, and it was just an effortless trap.
You have incredible stories. Thank you so very much for sharing them with us. You obviously are concerned about what's happening with dams.
Well, I am, but it's a great pleasure to be able to talk about them.
What is going to be happening to the environment and to the people when these dams continue to be built?
Well, you have to consider that about 60% of the world's major river systems are already dammed, and we seem to be intent on raising that number to as close to 100% as we can. If we do that, the impacts will be absolutely devastating. They're already devastating. There are more and more people who are aware of the serious impacts of dams, who are organizing against dams. I think we need to give them some support.
Is the problem with dams just as serious here in the United States? I know that some people are even proposing eliminating Hetch Hetchy in Yosemite National Park.
Well, we've sort of come out the other end of our dam development. We've used up every good site for dams that exists, and now we're realizing their environmental impacts and thinking that we ought to be taking some of them down. And that process has started, and we can still take down many, many more than we have. Of course, in the long run, all dams will die, so it behooves us to do that before they collapse and drown a lot of people in the process.
Your stories in your book were so moving. It must have really affected you when you were there.
These were powerful stories, and it's hard not to be pulled in. I certainly was, and that's what drew me to dams to begin with. They are magnets for conflict.
Thank you so very much for sharing these stories with us, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Nancy.
I have been speaking with Jacques Leslie, writer and journalist, who is author of Deep Water, The Epic Struggle Over Dams, Displaced People, and the Environment. And for viewers who would like more information, please call or write. On behalf of our nonprofit organization, Educational Communications, I'm Nancy Perlman, wishing you a natural, unspoiled environment.